6 p.m. Emma, would you please take the roll call?
Margie Davy,
I'm here.
Lisa Moore, Jacob Claymeyer,
Here.
Alyssa Ranke,
Here.
Vic Oliver, Brad Spanbauer,
Here.
Joe Stevenson, Jaden Zern.
Here.
Here. 5 present, we have quorum.
Great. Okay, I'm going with we don't have any public comment tonight. And so let's move on to approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor of the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great, that was easy. Okay, tonight we are very lucky. We have a presentation. We have Jacob Kluza, did I get that right? From UW Extension here, and we'll see what he has to share with us. He's a horticultural outreach specialist, and I bet he's got some really good stuff.
Yes.
Yes.
So, hello everybody. Again, my name is Jacob Kluza. I'm the Hort Outreach Specialist for Rodeo County. My presentation today is landscaping. Do I have to speak into this as much as possible? Yes. So, landscaping with climate change in mind, challenges and adaptive strategies. So I really want to thank a few of my colleagues, Lisa Johnson, Julie Hill, Steve Avaris, and Paul Whitaker, who have definitely helped me out with significant contributions to this PowerPoint. A lot of the data you'll see comes from the State Climatology Office. So we back a lot of our stuff up with real facts. So up, down, left, right, maybe.
Just need
It is on. Okay, there we go. So what?
Sure, if you want to use this instead,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, this will be easier. So presentation overview. I have 3 main sections. I'm going to try and make them each about the same length, relatively quick. So the first one is just about understanding the basics of climate change and the carbon cycle, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Look at the current status and impacts in Wisconsin, so what we're actually seeing on the ground, and then look at strategies and adaptations on how to overcome what we're seeing. So just to start out, weather versus climate. These are usually misnomered. Most people don't understand the difference between weather and climate change. We're looking at the current regime right now. So weather is the state of the atmosphere at a given time, place, usually described by temperature, moisture, and wind, while climate is the overall meteorological conditions, including those things, but will prevail in a region over time, right? So if it was just windy and cold and wet yesterday, that's weather, or it's been really droughty and sporadic over the last 3-4 years. So understanding the difference between climate and weather. So next I want to talk about the carbon cycle. So the main contributor to climate change, global warming, is carbon dioxide. And so carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere, lingers in the atmosphere quite a bit of time. However, there are lots of different ways carbon is reused throughout the atmosphere and the troposphere. You can see all different types of processes, reservoirs, and sinks. The main portion of this slide I really want you to know is that rocks, the ocean, and plants sequester a significant amount of carbon. 1 gigaton is 1 million tons, right? So between 1,000 gigatons and 100,000 gigatons can go, active carbon can go through this process each year. So just to want you to remember that, like, naturally about 1,000 gigatons go through carbon, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. So that's a lot of carbon going through these cycles. And again, I said that carbon dioxide is the most significant important gas contributing to climate change. This is a cycle of atmospheric vegetation and atmospheric carbon. And so you can see that in winter, the yellow really increases, and that's the carbon dioxide concentration. And then as the plants grow, it really, the plants absorb CO2 and then it goes away. But really notice that there's a 3-month lag time, and that during winter is the increased concentration for the northern hemisphere. And so with that increased CO2 means lots of different increased weather events. So the greenhouse effect, again, is when sun comes in, it hits the earth, it's absorbed and then re-radiated. And once it's re-radiated, it is then absorbed by carbon dioxide, methane, nitric oxide, and water, which all hold heat, contributing to global warming and climate change. And so again, winter was the most amount of CO2, so we see the greatest effect during winter. So just to give you a baseline data, so pre-industrial revolution, 1750 to 1840, we see a baseline of about 280 parts per million. And then we go through the 30s, the 50s, the 60s, all the way up to now. We're about to 420 parts per million carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. So nearly double the baseline event. So there's no confusion that humans are responsible for nearly doubling the CO2 level in our atmosphere. And so from that, we've seen significant climate change impacts, right? We've seen more weather events, we've seen droughts, heavy rains, floods, earlier springs, earlier blooms, and later onsets of fall. Wetter springs and wetter winters, so it's not snowing as much, it's raining during winter. We had thunder snow, so we're seeing lots of different things. And then with that, it's harder to get into your fields, especially in spring and winter. So, and plus there's some increased insect and disease pressure. So these are a lot of claims, and I'm going to show you the data to really support those claims next. So what are we seeing already? And these are the numbers State Climatology Office has helped me with. So just looking at temperatures over the last 120 years, we can see that from the 1900s to the 1970s was characterized by lots of years with negative temperatures, like negative anomalies. It was cooler than average. And if we see after 1980, it really starts to go up. We had maybe 1 or 2 cooler years than average, but now they're all above average. And they're averaging about 3 to 4 degrees above average, which is a significant amount. So what does this mean? There are more billion-dollar weather disasters since 1980. So if we look, 1980, there was an average of 3 all the way up to about 2,000, right? 3 major weather disasters. And if you go all the way up to the last 2 years, we had nearly $500 billion in damage over the last 2020 and 2021. And you can see that it's mostly, in the beginning there's maybe a little bit of thunderstorms, some drought, purple is winter storms. But if we look over, at the last bit, it's mainly severe thunderstorms, tropical cyclones, and wildfires and droughts. And $500 billion is a significant amount of money. So this is costing real people, real money in real places, right? So climate change isn't a hoax. It really costs money and it really hurts us. So how are we affected in Wisconsin? So the number one thing that is affected for landscaping and gardeners is that the plant hardiness zones are changing, right? So in 1980, when the plant hardiness zone map originally came out, we were zone 4B. And zone 4B is that dark blue, and that's where Stevens Point is at. So even from 1980 to 2012, the temperature moved up, but in the last 20 years, it's moved up even more. So if we look at Oshkosh in 2023, it's nearly zone 5A or 5B, which is that's 5 to 6 degrees warmer than it was historically. So we can support a lot more plants, technically with this shifting. And it hasn't shifted equally. We see that it's kind of moved up towards the lake, and we've had a moderating effect. And it's kind of shifted down in a few other places. So plant hardiness zones are really changing throughout the state. So these 2 slides are annual temperature, and I'm sorry it's so blurry. When it gets big like that, it just blurs out. But on the left-hand side is annual temperature by decade from the 1880s, 1900s, all the way up. You can see that the last 20 years have been the warmest warm weather ever, probably except for the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. And during the 2010s is by far the wettest decade in the last 100 years, nearly doubling the amount of precipitation over most of it, right? So 20% more precipitation on average. So it's warmer and wetter in Wisconsin. And so I really want to just highlight that looking at averages tends to hide data, right? So if we look on the left-hand side, this is what would be characteristic of a very stable environment. So each week we get some rain. It's really similar. The temperature is really similar. The average is 1 inch per week. The temperature is 68. But if we look at the other side, it goes 0, 0, 3, 0, 0, 0, 5, 0, 0, 2, and that average is still 1 inch per week. If we look at temperature, the temperature on the left varied 6 degrees between 65 and 71. The one on the right actually varied 20 degrees from 65 to 85, right? But the average temperature is still relatively the same at 69, right? And what I really want to highlight is it rained 3 inches that one week, and it was relatively warm. And then it was really warm that next week, 85, right? So if it's averaging 85, that means it's got 3 days warmer than 85 and 3 days less than 85. So it rained and then was droughty and droughty and droughty and then rained again 5 inches. So that is like drowning, dry, dead, dry, dead, dead, and then raining again. So that's a lot of stress and a lot of damage per plant. But on average, you wouldn't know, right? So even in the data I'm presenting, we're still hiding a lot of big events. So when I say average temperature of 4 degrees, there's some years where we see like a 10-degree difference between our average temperature. So again, we're still hiding a lot of data when we look at averages. So again, I told you it was warmer and wetter. This is the climate data that really supports this. This is from NDON, NOAA, and a few different Center for Climatic Research at the Nelson Institute. And so this is just showing that, again, it's getting warmer in Wisconsin. However, it's fairly warm, fairly uniform for warming. The southern portion seems to be warming a little bit less versus the rest of Wisconsin is warming up more. And if we look at wet, again, 20% increase in precipitation, but it's mainly in the south and the south central portions of Wisconsin. So it's warmer and wetter, but not throughout the whole state. So it's warmer in every season. Again, 3 degrees on average since 1950. The last 2 decades have been the warmest. But however, the most warming, again, is in winter where that CO2 is, right? So understanding that where the most amount of CO2 is the most amount of climate change we're going to get. So I said it was wetter, so we're looking at the historical change, right? So again, we've seen precipitation increase about 20%, but it's been very variable throughout the state. We see that the north isn't getting as much as rain as we do versus the southeastern part of Wisconsin is getting the most amount of change, or second most versus the western part. So it's also wetter during different seasons. Again, during the winter and spring, it's not evenly distributed. During winter and spring, it's much more wetter. During the summer, we can expect much more drought, especially in the north and the west. Versus, again, fall, it's a little bit more wet in the central portion of the state. So again, it's not evenly distributed. Oops, sorry, we'll finish this. It's not evenly distributed, and at different times of the year, it's wetter at different portions. So I really want to just cover this. Again, this is one thing that highlights the variability. So on average, if a 100 year means we have a 1% chance of having a storm each year, right? But if we look at the last 10 years, Wisconsin has had 21 100-year storms. Again, 5 inches, 20% since 1950. But Dane County had an event where they received 12 inches in one day. That's half of their yearly precipitation in one event, right? So that's a disastrous event. That's washing away lots of stuff, that's drowning things. So we're having, again, variable results. So summary of what we're seeing: warmer, longer, more warming at night, more warming during the winter. Precipitation is more, but again, during winter, spring, more large dumps and less average stuff, and more frequent drought periods. So it's going from wet to dry with no stable point in between. So how does this affect landscapes, right? So we talked about basics, and now it's how does this affect landscapes and our ability to mitigate those? Well, number one is the impacts will follow the path of emissions we take, right? So I showed you that our historical parts per million were 420. If we do absolutely nothing, we're going to go up to 1,200. If we do everything right, we can kind of go back down to where we used to be, right? That's if we do everything right. But the severity will depend on our action in the next 10 years. So it can be really bad though. So just understanding that, and again, adaptive strategies should be really adapted to your local area, understanding that, again, my recommendations for Ashland is not going to be the same as here, right? They're a lot drier, have a lot less effective climate change versus us, who have much more extremes. So plan for wetter, drier conditions based on maps, and it's going to be unpredictable, both wet and dry spells. So the potential landscaping impacts. So we had all the issues with climate change, right? And then how it's actually going to affect gardeners, farmers, landscapers, right? So if there's more precipitation, it means it's going to take longer to get in there. You're not going to have as much plant growth. You're going to have compaction, and you're going to need shorter season varieties, right? If you have higher humidity, you're going to have many more fungal diseases. The higher nighttime temps mean plants grow less tall, which again can stress them out. More heavy rain, but you know, like you understand, like the more problems we have, the more challenges for gardeners, and they directly correlate to real problems, right? So more vigorous weed growth means more weed management. I have to spend more on pesticides, more animals get killed, right? So all of these have significant impacts. So how do you, these are landscaping strategies, how do you plan for drought, right? What are some strategies you can use to mitigate drought? Well, number one is use organic mulches. And number two is have a plan for watering. And this may include drip irrigation. So at Winnebago County, we got a grant last year, and so we're installing irrigation at our site this year. So you can come and learn about how to install drip irrigation at the extension, and so hopefully we'll have that up by April for the residents of Winnebago County. It's super easy to put up. Most kits are like $200 or $300, and it will save you a lot of time, energy, and resources, right? So drip irrigation, organic mulches are the number one. Number two is replace your lawns with either low mow or grasses or sedges. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the No Mow May campaign. So for us, No Mow May can have lots of unintended consequences. People letting their lawn grow and then they mow it all out and kills it. So for us, we don't do No Mow May, we just do mow high in May, June, and July. That's our campaign. And I can talk to you guys a little bit more about that. But mowing high is one of the number one things you can do to reduce the impact for drought. The bigger your grass, the deeper the roots, the more water and less water it can handle, so the more variation it can handle. And so YouTube has a few really good videos if you want to learn about native sedges and how to use them, as well as Prairie Nursery has a lot of good resources as well. So more drought landscaping strategies is consider bee lawns, right? Pollinators are a very important part of the ecosystem. And this is one example, right? So they planted agastache their entire front yard, right? And it's environmentally friendly, it's low mow, reduces fertilizer, it's extremely easy to use and provides lots of habitat for all insects, birds, spiders, lots of different things. So wonderful strategy and looks beautiful. So our last, well, there's two more strategies for drought, I think. So it's consider planting native plant beds or drought-resistant plants. So native or non-native, right? So prairie plants tend to have these deep roots which can go down 6 to 8 feet and have a penchant for being able to store water in the tuberous root systems. So planting things that are definitely resistant. Plant selection and placement will key, and we can talk a little bit more about this. Heat mitigation. So again, we talked about it's going to be warmer in summer, higher 90-degree days, more amount of them. So plant trees. Trees are number one way to reduce your energy input if you plant them on the south of your house. If you're planting trees at parks, the shade can be about 10 to 15 degrees cooler on average than in the sun. So consider planting trees as one way to mitigate a lot of heat. So matching your tree to your type of soil. Here we got a lot of clay, so we really need to match it with stuff that is very tolerant of frost heaving and has really strong roots. Lots of apples, the calorie pear is good for that, but it becomes extremely weedy, right? So, but we really want to talk about diversity. We want to consider tree selection and tree diversity. I really want to talk about, like, you know, you might consider planting about 50 or 100 of one variety. I would recommend maybe planting 30 of like 3 varieties, right? So really getting into diversity is key. It's really an insurance policy. So we talked about large rain flood events, right? So how do you plant for large rain events? Well, you can use berms, right? Berms are much higher, the water flows out of them, they can have drought-resistant plants. You can also plant moisture-loving plants on the berms as well and use them as a ground cover. So you would want to use species with large tolerance for moisture level swings, and we can talk a few more about those that have a high swing range. And they can look wonderfully attractive as well. The next one is raised beds. So this is more for more gardening. You can do landscaping in raised beds, especially if you're in have a small front yard and you want to terrace it. But again, this is one option. So you can select plants that can handle wet and be planted later in season, and they have a much higher drainage. So last is rain gardens. So rain gardens is number one, direct pathway for water and planting areas using elevation changes. This is one that was probably just planted. It'll grow in a little bit more. It's got a lot of sedges. It's got a lot of, like I would say, herbaceous perennials, a lot of grasses, and it's even got a few woody ornamentals. And this is in someone's backyard. Rosalind Bately, she is a master gardener for Dane County. So she implemented this in her backyard. And so plant selection and again placement will be critical. So planning for wetter winters. How do you plan for wetter winters? Well, you may need to tie your arborvitae together. These arborvitae tend to get really heavy and wet with snow, and they tip over and break. These are like 20 to 30 years old. They can't really be replaced readily, so if you break them off, they're kind of screwed. So you might just have to tie more things together or tie them to certain things. So plan for rain on top of stuff and rain on top of snow by choosing plants that have less sensitive wet feet. And we can really, like, suggestions is moving more away from arborvitae, which tend to be the number one culprit, right? So again, we're planning for less snow cover and more rain and more freeze thaw cycles. So we need to have plants that are more tolerant of those. So again, winter mulch is important. So not rock, right? So we want live stuff that is able to absorb water, not just cold rock, right? That's gonna hurt things. And then you also don't wanna plant evergreens right up against buildings. So all that heat gets blasted at that brick, it's warmer, it unfreezes, half the plant's frozen, half the plant's not, and that's why half the plant's dead. So you really wanna make sure you move your landscaping away from your building, especially if they're evergreens. So winter mulch, especially if it's dry in fall like it has been this year, and it's been deceptively dry this fall. So you might need a tent evergreens, and that's just throwing a plastic bag over your evergreen, right? White bag or just something over just to protect it from wind. And then if you do plant like stuff in pots, you might want to do a larger pot, right? The more soil mass, the easier it is to survive and the less frost heaving. So plant for late springs and early fall frosts. So stuff that is very hardy, not very like tender like heucherellas or tiarellas, stuff like that. Oops, did I miss? So less freeze thaw. Okay, so longer growing seasons and wetter springs. How do we grow for that? Well, you can choose later maturing varieties, especially if you're doing like herbaceous perennials, annuals, and stuff like that. You can go for longer growing varieties or day neutral varieties. Definitely you don't want to plant in waterlogged soils. The more waterlogged they are, the more setback they get, right? So if I just wait till Mother's Day and plant them in 60-degree warm soil, my plants will grow much better, right, than if I planted them like April 1st in the wet muck, right? So just understanding that even though you got them out early, they're more stunted and had a harder start life, which means that they have a harder end line than if you just waited to plant, right? So don't get in too early, and then plant selection and placement again is key. So more plants, more pressure, more disease. If you're planting susceptible varieties, don't, right? So understanding that this phlox gets disease no matter what. Like, just don't plant phlox, you know, so, because it's not going to last. Like, why would you plant something that's just going to die anyway? So understanding that if it's disease susceptible, just don't plant it. And then use good cultural techniques, understanding that if it has disease, cut that disease out, right? So just using good landscaping strategies. And so we talked about selecting ornamental plants with a large temperature and moisture regime. And so one example would be little blue stem, right? And so we see little blue stem, that's what it looks like, Schizachyrum scoparium. We have quite a bit of it around here as a landscaping plant. Its natural range goes up from Maine all the way down to Arizona, right? So it goes from like zone 1 to zone 13. So it's extremely adaptable. It doesn't require a lot of fertilizer. It's usually deer resistant. So just really selecting plants that are widely variable and understanding like why this is such a good landscaping plant. So the most resilient gardens imitate the natural functions of a natural ecosystem, and the more sustainable and resilient it becomes, right? So the more we imitate natural processes, the more resilient it becomes. So we're going to support pollinators as much as possible. We're going to use good plant selection and siting, and then we're going to remember to plant for pollinators because they need support during all life stages. And so this is the portion where I talk about the different parts or different plants of the list. And so I'm just going to go through them real quick because I know we're a little bit behind on time. And so these are just plants. Some of them overlap with the list before, but this is just like a comprehensive list of early bloomers you can plant in your yard or around for pollinators. Well, I'll at least talk about a few. So these are all what I would call spring ephemerals. They bloom very early. These are what you would call like forest, again, spring ephemerals. So they tend to grow in forest or woodlands. So the mid-season bloomers, we have the coneflowers, we have the milkweeds, we have the foxgloves, the liatris, and the mountain mints, which is Picanthemum virginium. It got a new name. And then we have like more of just the semi-natives, hyssop, Joe pie weed, prairie clover, and wild lupines. With lupines, you have to be very careful. It needs to be the wild variety, not the cultivated variety. Cultivated variety is invasive and horrible and doesn't actually provide any pollinator benefits. So, culver's root, coreopsis, rattlesnake manister, lead plant, amphora. So these are all providing an abundance of pollinators and flora. You can see that there's a few bees on there as well. So going into late season bloomers, we have their asters. So this is a lot of the Asteraceae family, New England aster, smooth aster. We have our goldenrods. We have showy, stiffy, and Canada. There's actually 7 native varieties of goldenrod. These are just the 3 most common. Then we have more, I would say, asters, the helianthemums, the cup plants, the compass plants, which are all, again, look like sunflowers. And then we get into grasses. We have big blue stem, little blue stem. We've got Indian grass, which is sorghum. And then we get into native shrubs. So shrubs also provide lots of habitat for birds, pollinators, and insects. So cranberry, buttonbush, and elderberry. Then we get into trees, and so these are kind of like a mix between like a small tree or a large bush and a small tree, right? And however you prune it is however it goes, right? So that redwood could be a bush somewhere, or it could be a tree. Same with the 9-bark and the corylus, the hazelnuts, right? So these are all providing lots of different pollinators and benefits, and are all still native. And then we have basswood, so Tilia americana. We have black cherry and eastern redbud. Or eastern red cedar, sorry. And so those are junipers. Again, look at all those wonderful flowers for pollinators as well. And then grasses, so little blue stem, prairie dropseed, panicum virgatum, which is switchgrass. We have a fox sedge, and then this is yellow nutsedge. It's not labeled, but this is also a really good one. So those are my plant lists. This last little bit is really easy things you can do to reduce your carbon footprint. So fall cleanup, don't do it. If you need to use an electric leaf blower, use an electric one. So leaf blowers, any 2-stroke engine is about 100 times more pollutant than a car engine. So if you run your leaf blower, your weed whacker, or any 2-stroke engine, it's about equivalent of taking about a 200-mile car trip. So it's real simple, get an electric, right? Or don't do it. Save work, right? Consider leaving some leaves to breeze for pollinators. So lawn care, again, we talked about electrics, so often lighter. However, they don't have as much range. However, I have an electric and I don't have a problem mowing my 1 acre. The only thing I have a problem with is my neighbors love it because I can mow at 7 a.m. and not wake any of them up, but it doesn't have as much torque, so if I let my lawn grow longer, then it's a little bit harder to mow. But this is a really good option as well. They're relatively cheap. And they're really an easy way. And then another thing is reduce the size of your lawn. I don't need a whole acre of lawn for my little house, but I have it and we're working to get rid of it next year. And then low-mow grasses. So synthetic fertilizers are another easy way, right? So when I pour regular fertilizers on, and so they can either volatilize into the air, they can run off with erosion, or they can leach, but only about 40 to 60% actually make it to the plant when I apply fertilizer. If I used a slow release fertilizer, 90% gets to the plant, right? So if you think 40 to 60, or depending on which number you use, 40 to 60, and obviously 40% of fertilizer is making it into the groundwater. So you can reduce that by 20 to 30% if you just use slow grow fertilizers, right? So that's another easy way to reduce your impact. If you're using synthetic fertilizer, try only applying twice, once around Labor Day, once around Memorial Day, and that's it, right? So if you have to use it only then. And then again, organic, slow release in vegetable gardens. So mulching, I said a little bit about mulch, but it prevents erosion, maintains soil moisture. You can use a living mulch. You can plant grasses as mulches, so you don't have to just do tree bark and stuff. I've seen people use tillage radishes and carrots as a mulch because they come by and they literally grind them up every year. You can use plastic mulch or biodegradable. We have a cardboard one that we lay down, and it dissolves over 3 or 4 years. We just take a hole and punch a hole in it and plant into it. So there are a few different, a compost blanket, that's what we kind of use, right? So it's coconut core and cardboard. So there are some other things, and then crop residues, right? So this is a picture of our compost pile right here at our garden. So yeah, you could just lay all that, and that would be a great winter mulch as well. It doesn't look as good, but I mean, you're getting the benefits. So you can lead the way. Landscapes are part of natural ecosystems. They make direct observations and share your experiences, and then you can control your own actions and can educate others, right? So that's how we amplify our effect. And individual choices lead to collective actions, right? So the small things that Jacob does with composting leads to more excitement, leads to different things. So it's small actions. And so these are our resources. We have the Wiki, which is the Wisconsin Climate Change and Impact Solution. I'm actually on this board. So I'm on pretty much every one of those boards. So climate change is really important to me. So special thank you again to Lisa, Julie, Steve, and Paul Whitaker. They provided a lot of information, a lot of practical knowledge to this presentation. And thank you. Again, this is my contact information. You can reach me 232-1976 or email at cluza@wisc.edu. The QR code will take you to our website as well.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I know a lot of information to process, but basically it's warmer, it's wetter, it's going to be rougher, and we need to plant different things to really mitigate those.
Thank you very much.
Well
I
said.
kept thinking, I'm really glad that this is being recorded, because then I can go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Jacob? Anything he flew past or that wasn't covered?
I just wanted to plug, some of those adaptive strategies that you were mentioning about, like rain gardens, as well as potentially rain barrels. At least can help you have a more sustainable watering source. If any of the residents need or would like to have a reduction in their water bill, there are benefits that you can apply for with the city for having those. So I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, clearly you did a fantastic job.
Very well done.
Thank you very much.
I know it's a lot. It really is, and like even for me, it takes like a lot of different time. But just the main facts is that like little things can help. There's super simple things you can do, and you just need to be more conscientious of what we plant where. And it's not just like throw it in, it'll go wherever. So that's the main impetus behind my presentation.
So you're not a fan of the wildflower bombs that people make?
Well, I actually, we do quite a few different programming where we make seed bombs, right? And we talk about throwing them in areas that are less developed, right? And we talk about that, but like those are such wildflower mixes that it doesn't really matter. Like when we're talking about like a $20 perennial or like a $30 peony, something that like costs money to replace, I could buy 20 of them a year, right? Or like a tree that is eventually worth like $20,000, so those investments are significant versus like a little seed bomb. So, but I definitely do support seed bombs, though. We make quite a bit of them.
Good to know.
Thank you for the information, and I think it's really going to be helpful for our discussion around how the municipal zoning ordinances, the plants that they call out, could be potentially adapted for these different warmer, wetter conditions here in Wisconsin to not only benefit like the local environment, the larger environment, but also just the aesthetic of our community and the value that people get from landscaping that they have to install during commercial, developments as well. So that list that you shared originally was also super helpful in evaluating the two different lists that we have, both the one that's on the books that may have just been on the books for a little while, and then what we might look to improve it with. So is there going to be a separate discussion on comparing those lists, or should it be in the kind of with this presentation?
It can go either way. Do you want to discuss that now? I want to, well, Jacob's still here. We might want to talk about the low mow
Okay.
thing too. But yes, we could definitely either add that for next time, or we could do it
I
now.
included the list if you
Oh.
want to talk about them.
Like we can see that.
I can zoom. Okay, so this is the list. And then Jacob, if you want to talk about this, I think this is what you had that's currently in the ordinance.
Yep, so I took the 50 current in the ordinance, what their landscaping plant value is, and then I added a resilience weight. So I really want to talk about resilience, right? The plants that are able to be adaptive over multiple areas. And then based on, we had a few people go over the data, like to give resilient weights based on the plants. So you can really get a secondary idea of which ones are actually more resilient, right? And then I weighted, I sorted it by kind of like what type it was, and like perennial, low deciduous, and then it goes from like low resilience up to high resilience. So again, some of these ones on the list are really low, like Astilbe, Hosta, Pachysandra are really low in resilience. They're more wet plants, so they're gonna die really fast with a drought. So some of these ones on here are a little bit less resistant. And then there's a few on here, again, like the calorie pear that I would suggest removing. And then if you want to just go to like my suggestions, the second one. Yeah, so here's 50 additional ones. They don't have any landscaping values. I didn't want to put in any suggestions yet, but I gave them resilient weights. So you can see that the 50 additional ones I have are, again, really high in resilience. And they go through a wide range of types, from shrubs to trees to perennials. But again, they're natives or native derivatives with really high resilient values.
So the list that we're looking at right now, which is the 50 that you've added,
Yep.
these are currently not included in the city's, they're not included in the landscaping list for the city?
Yes. So these are ones that are not on your list, that are also native and high resilient as well. So that's why I said I had some recommendations with some stuff
Yeah.
you can add. And
Yeah.
that's why I said I even have an additional 50s, because there's about 150 native plants that we reliably use in the landscape industry right now. But these would be the most common.
Yeah, I was gonna say, these all look like very common native species.
Yeah, turtlehead, like stuff like that, carex, Chianthus, some oaks, viburnums, spartinas, a prairie cordgrass. So yes, stuff that you see out there, but it's just not on the list, right?
How do we get these added into the landscaping? Like, how do we get these added so that they're more readily, they're more likely to be chosen as potential species in like landscaping?
If you want to add these 50 to the list, we can easily just
add
add
them.
them to the existing chart. Yeah.
I think the resilience weight wasn't included in the list before. I think
No.
including that would also weigh some of these native plants higher on
Mhm.
people's.
Well, then my next recommendation is you have, so if you go back to the first list, it's 1.1 points for some of your native ones, right? And that 0.1 of a point, like I went through and did some calculations, because I do landscape design as well. So I'm aware of your landscaping ordinance and how for space to put wet where. But like it seems kind of low, like for ginger and coreopsis, right? 1.1 per 20, and that's what they're highlighted in green for, is per 20. So 20 of them to equal 1.1. So for some of them that are maybe like a higher resistance value, like Asclepias tuberosa, which is like the, it's a butterfly bush, but it's a milkweed, right? That one, like for 20 of them, I would say like the value weight should like go up maybe like to 1.5, right? Like if you would, my recommendation would be to like maybe prioritize some of those higher weighted values for a little bit more to like, if you get more credit for a native, you're more likely to plant them, right? And 1.1 isn't, like, to me, over the 1, right? So some of the non-native ones are only 1. So 0.1 per 20, that's just my opinion. So another recommendation would maybe altering the point values to reflect a little bit more impetus on natives, right?
Right, and I feel like we discussed that at the last meeting, is understanding how the point value works, like 1 versus 1.1, and exactly, I would agree that things that are currently ranked on the resilience scale that are a 7, 8, or 9 should have more landscaping value than something that is lower on the resilience score. I mean, I think basically the resilience score and the landscaping score should almost match. Should start to become a little bit more in alignment. That'd be my recommendation.
As an
Yeah.
advisory group, we can make that recommendation. We can't say it's going to happen, and it would have to require a zoning change, I believe, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go through plan commission then too, if that's
Okay.
something you wanted to look at.
And is there someone who can like explain how that point value, the assignment of those points works, like the 1 versus 1.1? Or is it sort of arbitrary?
So when the code was updated in 2017, my understanding is they just had the consultant, kind of assign the points. So I don't know if anyone internally knows exactly like why one's 1 point value versus 1.1, or what the significance is of the 10% increase.
I was on the steering committee for the zoning change, and the person who ran it at the time, who was from Oshkosh, is no longer with the city. He's moved on. But I don't remember anybody ever discussing why they were, or questioning that, because it was developers and people on the steering committee. I was the only sustainability idea there, I think. And I tried to raise lots of points that didn't actually get heard very well. But we definitely can make a recommendation now to the Plan Commission that we make these changes for zoning, I would think, and see how they're received by the staff, right?
In regards, I didn't mean to do that.
No,
Go ahead, Jake.
Just in regards to the point system too, I mean, really I think it's currently set up to be like non-native versus native, right? Is essentially determining if, and I think that's shown in your analysis too, Jacob, right? It's that the ones that are native are valued a little bit higher. The question I have for you, Jacob, is is there any benefit to having non-native species even within the code in the first place?
Yes. So again, we talk about diversity, right? So, and there's a few different not climatologists, but like climate scientists who looked on biodiversity, and it says about 75% of your plants should be native, so you can have about 25%. So if you like stuff that has high ornamental value, right, peonies, whatever, roses, you can still have those in your landscape and still plant them, a lot of them, but you'd want to have a lot more perennials. So they still provide, benefits, they're still pollinator plants, but they're not as beneficial as some of the others. And then having non-natives, they tend to be a lot more disease resistant, like they've been bred a lot more, so they can have a lot more resistances, versus natives, again, they're naturally more resistant, but then they're not as bred for like certain viruses, hostavirus X, hostavirus Y, and patient necrotic spot virus, stuff like that. So they're not as resilient to non-weather issues, right? So you definitely should have some non-natives because they're beautiful, they're hardy. Barberry is hardy, stuff like that. So it can just be that last little bit, but it's not hurting. But I would like just to see a little bit of difference between the point value to really move towards the natives, right? And then again, you can choose how much, but the more you choose natives, the more benefits you get, the less plants you have to plant, and the more money you save, as a developer, right? So instead of planting 1,600 plants, if I plant 1,000 natives, right? And at $20 a plant, you just saved $12,000 in your landscape, and you went native, right? So again, the benefit is there if you just incentivize natives or stuff like that. So, but there isn't any hurt in having the non-natives on there.
Thank you. Yeah, it helps. I think in regards to like incentivizing it further, you know, having less landscaping may not be a good thing either, though, right? You use an example of like you're making less plantings. I would hope that we could still have a similar number of plantings, but maybe closer to that ratio of like 75% to 25%, and if that's more optimal as well. And so I look for opportunities maybe in the zoning code as well to do that, rather than maybe, having just less landscaping overall.
Well, so like when you're prioritizing more natives, like some of those natives are going to be big, right? So like Jupitorium, big plant, Jopai weed. So like if you have less of them, then they have more room to grow, right? So you're not just planting numbers to get numbers. You're not planting, and then there's a certain amount of attrition, right? You go back 5 years, you're supposed to look at the amount of plants to survive. So just because you have less plants doesn't mean it's bad as well, because you might be prioritizing things that are bigger. Like if you look at some of the bigger plants on the first list, some of the trees have like a 10 rating, some of the bushes have like 5 or 7. So, no, just on the first list. If you scroll down, so like some of the, like the Virginia, the potentilla, the honeysuckle, stuff that gets into the bushes has much higher rating, right? So again, you can really prioritize planting stuff into that instead of just little stuff, big stuff. So.
Would you have any recommendation on how we incorporate the resilience score into the incentivization? You said that maybe they should be mixed, and I agree, right? Should be incentivizing more resilient plants potentially.
So one quick fix, you can just weight it, right? So if it has a 7, 8, and 9, you could do like 1.1 or like 20% increase for like a 7, 25% increase, and a 30% increase. So it'd be like, what, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, right? Or just like based on how resistant it is. Or you could just say that these have higher resistant and put it in the code so people know that, like, hey, still B are on the code, but they're less resistant. Maybe I shouldn't plant them, right? So just giving people more information. So you can weight it, or you could just give them the information and hope that they make an informed decision.
Yeah. That
like these are more resilient. And when you see the resilient, you're like, oh, okay, the Japanese U has a 4. Like.
Funny, they're natives when they're Japanese. How weird.
Something else I have an interest in is like the difference between, so if all of our, say, commercial developments use the same sheet of plants, right? And it's probably because, for good reasons, cost or availability, but we kind of miss out on the diversity that we're really going after here. Have you seen in any other like landscaping ordinances or like strategies on how to incentivize diversity as well? I know that they, like, in the current code it talks about like having a diversity of different sizes.
Yes.
But it doesn't really go into specify, what the other developments around it have, or how many different species within each category you need. It might have something on that, but it's usually 4 species, say, on one development of shrubs. I don't know. Have you seen anything that could address that?
I used to work with the city of Plymouth, and that's Plymouth, Minnesota, so up in the Twin Cities. And our ordinance, that was a really affluent area. The mean house value is like 1.4 million, right? So very affluent. So there they had categories as well, right? So they had a list of plants, right, and then a weighted value and stuff you could basically pick out of, right? And then that value is worth more or less, right? And so that was their method. I'm not sure that works here, but I was talking to Emma earlier that like we could do something similar where, like if we make like, say we do native prairie plants and give them a 1.5 rating, and there's like 20 or 30 plants in there, and you can just pick any of them in there, and as long as you have 20 whatever, you get the right. And it promotes diversity, so you don't have 20 potentillas Because that's what when I see 1.1 per 20, then that person's going to buy 20 of them, right? And then move on to the next one and buy 20 of them. But I'd rather see them as buy like 5 and 10 and just be diverse, right? So if you just make a category where they can pick from or they can meet those requirements, I think that would be a little bit easier. Like, okay, I have a list of 50 plants, I just need to take 20 out of them, right? And so that would be, again, that's just off the cuff, but that is something I can think about. I can maybe talk to a few people and do some research on how to best incentivize diversity versus number of plantings.
Sure. I imagine as like a landscape designer, having that freedom of smaller numbers of plants could help change your design quite a bit. So I think that's a great recommendation.
Who doesn't love a mix and match deal? Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with 100 plants, right? So instead of picking from 50, you're like, oh, I only have to have 20 from this group, 20 from this group, 20 from this group, and they're all diverse, right? You could have wild grapes, you could have potentilla, you could have a whole bunch of different sunflowers versus Japanese barberry or Cornus sericea, a yellow twig dogwood, or something that's just
Did you see, was there anything glaringly obviously missing from the list as in things that we should not be planting or allowing to be planted?
So the calorie pairs and the 2 pairs are the only ones, and I think there's one other one. There should have been some notes at the bottom of this first page. So some hawthorns, like the Winter King, are not native. Well, we have native Crataegus species, but this one on here is not native, right? And then Chappaquin oak, it is a native oak, but it's not native to here, right? And it's not going to grow native to here. It's not going to grow well. It's this one on my arm, and they only really grow in the driftless area. So there's a few, and then like I said, the calorie pair and the other pair are the only glaring ones that are I would remove immediately, right? So calorie pair is on the invasive list. It's just so weedy, just horrible. It grows really well here, and it's very hardy.
It also smells.
Yeah. So the 2 pair varieties I would suggest maybe replacing, and then just understanding that a few of these are on nativeness, but the pairs are the only thing.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything? Okay, can we talk about low-mow spring and summer while Jacob's still here? You're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, to be clear, but I'm not going to kick you out, but
No
I don't
worries.
want you to feel like you have to either.
So I know you guys do the low-mow May, right? But I just want to talk a little bit what the problems with low-mow May are, right?
Well, we'd actually been doing no-mow May, so
Well,
we're
yes,
wanting
no-mow
to
May,
switch.
but yeah, so no-mow May can have some issues, right? So the number one is that people don't they don't understand the very basic of why they're not mowing, right? You're providing basic food for bees early on. You're providing shelter for different like ground nesting bees, different pollinator habitat, and you're just reducing your inputs. And so after May is when we have the biggest problem, because people will let their grass grow to 6 to 8 inches, and then they come by and mow it, right? And they mow it right after May, and June and July is still peak pollinator season. And so basically they grow it up long enough, just enough to draw things in, and then they mow it down. And then, so with grass, you're not supposed to mow more than 1/3 its total height at one time. So if you have a 3-inch tall grass, you can't cut it more than 1 inch down to 2. So if you have a 12-inch grass, you're not supposed to cut it more than down to 8, right? Most people cut it down to 3. So you're pretty much growing your long grass, you're letting it going to seed, and then you're scalping your lawn afterwards by cutting it back down. And then again, you have all these pollinators who just moved in that you just mowed down with your mower as well. So we don't, at UW we've moved away from no-mow May, and it's mow high May, June, and July, right? So if you could support it with different ordinances, so we recommend letting your grass grow out to no more than 4 inches, right? And this is going to let clover grow, it's going to let purslane grow, it's going to let a lot of these low grow ground covers that provide really early pollinator stuff, flowers for pollinators in the spring, right? And then if you continue it into June and July, you're saving water, you're saving, again, you're not having to mow it as much. and then you're really letting monarchs, all the other things get really established in May, June, and July, and then they move out really in August, right around the natural life cycle. So they're really moving out, they're flying around August. So you don't have to have that worry when you cut it down. So we have a whole presentation on moving from no mow to low mow June, July, or May, June, and July. And so if you want, I can send you that or come back, present more about it. But the basics is it's really good in practice. However, the follow through means a lot more damage, a lot more hurting than actual anything. And then the people who actually follow the ordinances, there's just like lots, like they don't, when you're doing low mow, you really need to weed right. They just let everything grow. So they're letting like curly dock, just lots of invasive weeds grow. So they're just not taking care of it as much as you would want, right? So you go and you see this huge lawn, and they're like, "Oh, I'm doing no mow May," and it's like, no, you're just not taking care of your building or whatever for a month. Like you're really not contributing positively.
So when you say to let your grass grow up to 4 inches,
Yep.
then if you wanted to do you want to keep it at 4 inches? Like, do you let it go to 6 so you can cut off a third?
No, I would say like the mow height you want to keep is at about 4 inches, right? So you could let it get up to 6 and then mow it back down to 4, but 4 is right about where you want to keep it. So 4, way better than 3 or 2 because grass roots tend to mirror the above ground. So 4 inches means that you have 4 inches of root ball, means they have much more access to water, much more access to nutrients, much more resilient, right? Versus low grow and then high grow and cut low. And I've seen people just mow their yard and then they kill like 100% of it, right? They just mow it all down and it's just like, oh. And then the only thing left is just bad stuff. So it's really good in practice, again, follow through, not the best. So but just incentivizing, maybe relaxing the ordinances for May, June, July, or, for longer yards. But I do believe the ordinance is above 6 inches anyway, so.
8
inches?
Yeah.
We've got 8 inches, so.
Yeah, so you're good. So you don't need to modify anything. You can just maybe promote and clear up a few things.
We need to educate the public so they understand.
Yeah, and
I
so
see an ad campaign in our future.
well, last year UW did a really big ad campaign. It was more up in Appleton, and so I think if that's something we might want to do, I'd be interested. Like I said, we have a bunch of resources, presentations. We have flyers that went out to a few counties. So I think that's something, if you're interested in coordinate between UW and, Winnebago County about like sending a mailer out, right?
Didn't the initial no-mo May stuff come out of Lawrence?
Yeah. And that original paper has been retracted now.
Yeah.
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 So,
Okay, yes, I suspect we will be calling you soon. Don't y'all think that sounds like a really good idea?
well, I was asking Emma, I know you saw that you had an extra space open for an alternate. This would be something great for me to connect continuously.
I would be happy to share with you how to get on our board, how to apply for an alternate. That would be awesome.
Because like I said, I'm on Wiki board, I'm on the state climatology board, I'm on the federal. It's like literally if it's climate change in UW, I'm on it. So it's like I would want to be through all levels just to connect everybody. Like this is, I can tell you about what's going on at Wiki, I can tell you about what's going on at UW, the DNR work group, Trillion Trees project, so stuff like that.
So don't give me your address right now, but do you live within the city limits of Oshkosh?
Unfortunately, not in the city.
Wrong answer.
What?
But you could move.
Right.
Okay, we'll talk later. I've got this little house next door that's for sale. Actually, I really do, but.
In the LOMO discussion, also, I think it's worth mentioning that we also are working on modifying the native landscaping ordinance, which allows people to do a total lawn replacement with native species that eliminates some of the constraints as long as they have a landscaping plan, a method of transitioning to native plants only, and so on. That may be higher than.
So I have a distinct memory up in Plymouth. I got called up to this one guy's house, and he's like, "Oh, I have this wildflower lawn." And it's like, yes, you do have a wildflower lawn, but you have 90% weeds in that wildflower lawn. You can't just like let it grow. So it was like, he definitely enjoyed the spirit of it, but you know, like the burdock, the thistles, like they were all in there as well. So it was like yes, I love the pollinator lawn, but you're going to need to weed that out.
So, yeah, definitely in the native landscaping ordinance, it still disallows, the invasive species.
Yeah, I think we had to do like 65% or more native like, species for the native lawn or whatever. And like I had to do like I literally threw a ring and had to count the plants inside the ring because that's how you statistically do that stuff. And it was like, yeah, you got more weeds in here than flowers. Like you're gonna have to weed this out before we can like approve your.
It's complicated. It's hard. Residents can't be experts on everything. That's where that education comes in.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have other things you'd like to discuss about the LOMO? I mean, I'm getting concerned that we need to start to publicize it because it's February, but we can bring this back in March and.
Is that the route that everybody would like to go, is the LOMO?
Well, I think we need to go in an education thing now.
Yes.
So whatever we
That's-
call it, yeah.
I
we
guess
can
that's
call
my
it a-
question. Then we have more time, I guess, if we don't need council approval, then we definitely have a few months to create those educational
that's
pieces, and we
true.
can blast them as they come. And I did share everything that we just put out last year. If anybody wants to all edit that stuff. Just let me know, and we can start putting it out there. I have emails and
So because we would be doing LOMO and not NOMO, we wouldn't have to go through and get approval of anything. It
There's no-
extends the time for us working on it.
no ordinances would be, as long as they're needed.
Because I think what we're trying to correct me if I'm wrong. What we're trying to promote to people are the things Jacob was just talking about, which was like keep your lawn at about 4 inches. Basically just like we're not going to come up against the issue of violating the ordinance. So we can put out more educational information about and sort of like here are maybe some myths or like disclaimers around NOMO, LOMO, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
The asterisk, that research paper was retracted.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that feels like a thing we can work on and have a little more time.
And if someone gets something done before the next meeting, and you want to send it my way, feel free, and we can go from there.
Emma, you said you sent that stuff?
We did.
It was part of the
Packet, I believe. This,
Oh,
The
that's right. Lisa
LOMO.
sent stuff.
the stuff from last year, LOMO, May.
Yes, I sent it after last meeting.
Okay.
My only question is if we go to LOMO May, I know we collected information before to get the education out, so like reoccurring and to track who's doing it every year. Are we okay with losing that, or do we still want to have like a sign up for LOMO May so we can collect your email and send you the education and remind you to do it next year, but there's really nothing that's happening on the back end of it.
One suggestion would be maybe a little sign, right? Like this lawn supports pollinators, right? So it's something that they get like a meeting center to sign up. Get a little sign that says you're the economic or eco-friendly, right? And you could collect data from that, right? Just incentivize them to sign up for it instead of just, I'm going to do it. And there could be something where you send them a little sign, or a thank you, or recognition, something like that. So, yeah, that is something.
That's our campus.
Yeah, still a lot of, we
Well,
have
that's
to
why working with the UW is helpful. I have a budget and I write grants.
We're liking you better every minute. Yes, hang around a while. Okay, so then maybe we want to bring I don't know how to say that for the.
So our
Mo High, May, June, and July.
May, June, July, back in March, right?
So our presentation is called "What's the Deal with No Mow May?" Right? That's what it's and basically the presentation is called "No Mow May is become a catchphrase in response to encouraging homeowners and their laws to grow during May. But this does this practice actually support pollinators? Join us to learn how an unknown law is actually made, impact pollinators, and how to support pollinators all year long, where we share science-based resources from the industry. And so part of the same domain we do have with the myths portion. And so usually we gear up for this as March. We do pretty much normal main presentations all throughout March. So when you come back, give it a normal main presentation here, and you're going to give like a public one throughout Oshkosh as well, you know, supposed to be normal May, but we have a concerted effort to really battle the myth of normal May, because we see so many calls that like, hey, the normal May, and it's so come on with that.
Yeah.
Is there anything happening citywide for Earth Day that we could include presentation or exhibiting for?
We always went to the university for pretty much everything. Yeah.
Piggyback?
Yeah. Yeah, can we put our name on that too, and then university can...
I can just do it all.
Yeah, yeah, that's my plan.
It's more like an outside thing. They plant trees and whatnot, so I don't know. But they're partnering some of the schools.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the presentation would fit.
I like the idea of potentially doing another presentation at some point this spring before May, so I think that's an idea we should talk about and we can come back to. But I do think just like getting some level of educational materials, whether those are social media graphics or other things, I mean, I know that's going to take among us to just like get that up and going, but I think that's something we could do, and I think as long as we feed it to you, you can get that out on the social media fronts.
Like I said, I have Word docs, so if you want to put them in them and then make them for you, send them back. I did want to point out Lisa did get this to me about Romo. It's in the meeting packet info, but she included some sites and communities that you may want to just take a peek at and see what they're doing. And a lot of them have been rebranding this as well. So I just wanted to point that out that is included in the packet.
We can put it in this month's packet too, right? Thank you.
I don't have time to do for next month, but just in my job, we're looking at doing a campaign. We haven't decided if it was now more or less like new research on it, because we definitely help. And the city is members, so they have access to all of our stuff. So that's it. That's the network.
Is it collaboration cool? Yes, partnerships. I love it.
So this was a topic of discussion last meeting we had. And so one question I have for you is, would there be a reason why this couldn't or shouldn't be a annual endeavor? In Mohai, May, June, and July.
Yep.
About August and April and all the other months that one might have to be with along. Is there a reason that you might not want to?
Yes and no. So the reason we just do it through May, June, July is those are the months when pollinators will be coming down, typically foraging on flowers, and then, you know, those are the main active months. Pretty much August they're moving on, flying and not as bound to flowers as much. So the real needs, like yes, you could mow high every month of the year, but you're not mowing that much in August as it is. Most of them are cool grass is August. So your amount of like your lawn is usually dying in August or going into dormancy and then kind of springs back into September. So you could do it the whole year if you wanted, and you could just adopt a low lawn, like to get up to 4 inches and that would work. That would be something too, but you just generally need to, like, it's just not, like, you can mow and it wouldn't be a problem in September, October. The critical months of when the animals are there doing the critical job is May, June. So that's when you just want to really limit the amount you mow. One of my neighbors mows like twice a week. Right? Like,
So primary benefit is between those months, but there's not a detriment to continuing that behavior. And that was kind of the thought process is, you know, if we were to, you know, say make signs or something like that, you know, the less time that you're, the less instances you're asking somebody to modify their behavior, the better.
$70 in gas. And that's oil maintenance, all those other things. So like even just reducing the amount, that's just a simple, and like I said, you can either reduce the amount of lawn you have, so you don't have to mow as much, or just reduce the amount that you mow.
You could probably save enough to get an electric mower at that point.
I think Jaden, too, a point you're raising is a good one, which is I think we can also offer people slightly more like month-specific behaviors, or like month-specific, like, hey, August is a time when generally it's going to be drier. You don't need to mow as much. Like, think about reducing your mowing during this period just for saving your lawn's health's sake, right? Like that, some of that kind of stuff. I mean, maybe and explaining to people, like, pollinators have started to mature and move on, and they're doing other things, so.
Yeah. So like when I look at my plant diagnostic questions, it's right about July 1st through the next month, where people just either they mow too much, they're not watering their lawn enough, and then I get tons of questions. It's like, well, and then our response is just let your grass grow a little bit longer. It's always just let it grow a little bit longer. Because the longer it grows, the more nutrients you can get. So it's like, oh well, my lawn is almost dead. It's like, well, just don't mow it. So that's always our most common thing for people with lawn issues is stop so much. But there are certain things like dandelions, purslane, broadleaf plantain that only are taken care of by mowing more often. So
It's complicated.
yeah, it is complicated. So, but diversity is key. So if you had a really diverse lawn with clover, like stuff that's really you wouldn't have that issue. So it's kind of case by case.
There's other methods of controlling, dandelion, plantain, and purslane, one of them being they're all edible plants as well.
Well, yeah, you can just recognize that they're not a weed and you love them for their value, but let me tell you, that lawn has to be manicured, it has to be cut on cross angles, it's got, let me tell you, some people are adamant about what their lawn needs to look like.
Yep.
Well, and that's a cultural thing, and it'll be a challenge to change that, but maybe the climate change is going to affect that anyway, as people see that the old rules no longer apply.
You're so optimistic.
There was a really horrible graphic, and I chose not to include it in this presentation. It's what our climate will look like in 20 years. And so our climate will be equal to Stillwater, Oklahoma, right, in 20 years if we do nothing. So it would be zone like 8A, zone 9A, and at that level you're barely getting frost. Like you might have 2 months of frost, but that's it. Like you're not having hard frost. So in 20 to 30 years, there might be a portion where planting cool season grasses isn't a thing anymore. You're in zoysia grass, you're in Bermuda grass, you're in, stuff like that. So it's probably the coldest, summer or going forward. So,
The point there is, the more actions we take now,
yes.
the less we're going to have to potentially change in the future.
Yeah, and like I said, simple thing, fertilizer, reducing your inputs, lawnmower, stuff like that. Really simple.
Okay. Well, I think we better move along with our agenda here. But yes, I think we will want to see you again. We'll be in touch. Our sustainability-related plans staff update. Emma, that's you.
So lots going on. We had our kickoff meeting for the EIG, the Comprehensive Energy Plan. So that's just continuing. Haven't had any meetings since I think that was mid-January. So just working on that. And then the sustainability plan. We've been having bi-weekly meetings with the consultant on that. Their first one 2 weeks ago, so I really wanted to speak. Make some data requests. We're working on making sure they have everything they need on their end to get going.
And this is all being done just between the staff and the consultant. There's nobody from this board that's...
As of now, yep. I'll keep you updated once those stakeholder committee meetings, once we get to that point. It's all very starting these meetings. So, and then another staff-related update. So a few meetings back, I do all of that staff sustainability training got approved. We are going to do that this year. That will be taking place in March. They're going to hold, I think, 6 total sessions over 2 days. So been, again, talking to the consultant who's going to be doing that, so it's exciting.
Is that just for department heads, or is that the entire staff?
Entire staff.
Who's doing the training?
Evolution marketing. Evolution is some, yeah.
Part of the training, if it doesn't include kind of the basis of why we're doing sustainability training, I think it's a great introduction here to that can benefit from about the basics of climate change and also how it affects us.
A lot of it's just going to be very high level because the whole city will do very different things, and then also things that employees can do at home that they may not be aware of. Where they can have savings with just how we're more sustainable life. So I'm excited for it. I hope it's engaging, and we're hoping once that occurs, maybe we can have an internal sustainability committee. We'll see how things go.
I'm sure there'll be so much interest once they learn that it's important.
Hope so.
Yes. Okay, well, the next one's on you too, the utility bill stuffers. What did we find out about that?
So, unfortunately,
I don't like it when you start out that way.
I was told that they did those informational flyers. I know this board had some consulting information in the past, but I guess they have not done any of that in the last year or so. If interested, we could possibly do that in the future, but most likely that would come out of our department planning budget, so that would just be need approval of that, and then we have to pay for.
Are they not doing it because more people are getting their bills electronically instead of in the mail?
I'm assuming so. I didn't really get an answer there. I was just told that they haven't been doing that. So.
I'm wondering if there's a way that they could, that we could have something that goes out with electronic.
Yes. Can it just be included electronically? I mean, if it's a PDF, like, and it just goes out.
Yeah, they could just open it or not.
I'm not sure if any other departments have done something like that.
We can trendset, we don't mind.
But I can see if that's, I guess, a possibility. Otherwise, like we were just saying, well, in May, if we want to get stuff out elsewhere, social media or through email, and that's always an option as well. I know it's not reaching, unfortunately, every resident.
What the topics we would do, like mowing and winter maintenance and stuff like that, fertilizers are all stormwater, so that could also go through.
Anything that you would like to put out, we can definitely explore
You
options.
should answer my phone calls more often.
I mean, I just wanted to give an update. I know that was a conversation as well. So.
Yeah.
Okay, and have we put out anything on the Facebook page about, on the sustainability Facebook page about the salting? I know we haven't had a lot of snow for it to matter, but
Oh, we've had a lot of salting. Well, we've had a lot of salting
I
though.
think stuff's been shared. I don't think we've created any posts, but I can check on that.
it would just be good if there is anything shared even on the city side, maybe we should also take it on ours. And I don't know if we're all very religious about looking at our sustainability side and sharing, but we should be. I know Brad's very good about that with lots of places.
I need to be better about it, but yes, that's a good tactic we could all.
We all need to be better about it, yes. Share, share, share. And Blue Sky is another place that is a great place to share information. That's happy stuff. So maybe we should start looking at that too. Okay, agenda items for future meetings. We've got our detention pond treatments that we have yet to find out any information on to discuss. Mr. Ponzer, who had spoken to us last month, has contacted me twice since. He's not being a pain about it, he just wants to be sure we remember. He did share that what he saw on there was something blue that when they were spraying, he believes it was cobalt something or other. It's, chemical words, so I can't remember them, but I do have it written down. So that's one thing we're still working on, and can bring back when we have it, but I don't know. I did reach out to the health department for the bird flu resources They did supply me with some that I have not had time to look over yet to get them to you, Emma, but I will.
Okay.
And it is becoming more of a problem than it was even last month. So of course we want to get this out to people that do have birds in their lawn and let them know what to watch for, because we really don't need an epidemic in Oshkosh or anywhere in the country for that matter. That would be nice. The municipal codes pertaining to trees and other plantings that we just have on hold at this point, right?
Yes, so hopefully trees and tree protection zones will come back next month.
Are we waiting on staff or legal
Yes,
or?
staff now. And then other plantings, kind of discussion today, chapter 30. I'm assuming we want to just keep talking about it. So,
Yeah, I
Shall we
think
get it resolved?
and then
native plant ordinance, if we can have that on the next.
that went to council last week.
Oh, okay.
So the second reading will be next week, I guess, for the approval of those edits, so.
Cool.
Okay, and LOMO, we can cross those words off our list, but we could say
HIMO.
HIMO. HIMO, LOMO, everybody mow. Okay. So we'll be putting mowing issues on for further discussion. We'll keep that on there. And then the reason that we chose not to have a workshop tonight was we wanted to be sure that we were able to give enough time to review our 2025 goals, which we haven't quite gotten to yet. But we knew we were going to have a presentation, so we wanted to give ample time for that. So that might be next time, or we might have more presentations. I like it when we have presentations because we are available to the public, and there are actually people who watch their Channel 10 when we're on, so that's good. We're getting that information out there to the people who care, so that's great. Okay then, our next meeting will be on Monday, March 3rd, same time, same place, be right here, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Nope, we're good.